The Galactic Council chambers hummed with the usual cacophony of alien dialects, each species vying for attention in the grand Yi Lun Hall that orbited the neutral moon of Proxima Tertius. For 3 centuries, humanity had sat at these tables, offering solutions, sharing technology, and mediating conflicts between species that had warred for millennia before humans even discovered fire. Stanley Chen stood in the human delegation's observation gallery, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the proceedings below. Beside him, Mays Rodriguez reviewed the final withdrawal documents on her datapad, her dark eyes reflecting the cold light of bureaucratic finality. "They still don't believe we're actually leaving," Mays said quietly, her voice barely audible over the translated arguments echoing through the chamber. Stanley nodded slowly. "They've grown too comfortable, too dependent." Below them, Ambassador Thexic of the Vorentine Collective was in the midst of another tirade, his translator struggling to keep pace with his indignation. "The human delegation's proposed infrastructure support is insufficient. We demand they increase their contribution to the colony stabilization efforts by 40%. It was the same story, different day. The Vorentines wanted more. The Crystalline Confederacy wanted protection. The methane breathers wanted expanded trade routes. Everyone wanted something from humanity, and no one wanted to hear the word no." Mays remembered when it had been different. When she'd first joined the diplomatic corps 20 years ago, humanity had been treated as genuine partners. The Council had valued human ingenuity, their strange ability to find compromise where none seemed possible, their willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. But somewhere along the way, partnership had become servitude. "Motion to speak," Stanley said into his comm unit, his voice carrying the weight of decades in interstellar diplomacy. The council chamber fell into an uneasy silence as the human delegation's light activated. It was rare for humans to interrupt proceedings. They typically waited their turn, observed protocol, played by the rules that others bent or broke with impunity. "The human delegation recognizes Ambassador Chen," the council moderator announced, her translucent form shimmering with what might have been surprise. Stanley descended the gallery stairs with measured steps, Mays following 2 paces behind as protocol dictated. When he reached the speaking platform, he didn't activate the holographic displays or present elaborate data visualizations like other species did. He simply stood there, a gray-haired human in a simple uniform, and spoke. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Stanley began, his voice calm and clear. "Humanity has served on this council for 317 standard years. In that time, we have freely shared our technology, our resources, and our blood. We've mediated 462 conflicts. We've provided disaster relief to 37 worlds. We've defended council space from external threats on 91 separate occasions." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. This wasn't typical human behavior. No apologies, no soft diplomatic language. "And in return," Stanley continued, "we have been told our contributions are insufficient. We have been blamed for problems we didn't create. We have been expected to solve crises that existed long before humanity reached the stars. Our requests for mutual support have been denied or ignored. Our warnings have been dismissed as human pessimism or paranoia." Ambassador Thexic rose from his seat, his crest flaring. "This is outrageous. The humans dare to—" "Sit down," Stanley said, his voice not rising but somehow cutting through the chamber like a blade. The translator caught something in his tone that made even Thexic hesitate, before slowly lowering himself back into his seat. Mays watched the assembly with analytical precision, cataloging reactions. Shock, confusion, anger, disbelief. None of them had expected this. "Effective immediately," Stanley said, pulling a small data chip from his pocket. "Humanity is exercising Article 73 of the Council Charter. Voluntary withdrawal from membership. All human personnel will depart Council facilities within 48 hours. All human-provided technology will be deactivated or removed. All defense pacts, trade agreements, and mutual aid treaties are hereby dissolved." The chamber erupted. Species were shouting in a dozen languages, demanding explanations, hurling accusations. The council moderator was calling for order, her form flickering with stress. Stanley simply uploaded the data chip into the council's central database and walked away. Mace fell into step beside him, and together they climbed back up to the observation gallery where the rest of the human delegation waited. "They're not going to accept this," Mace said as they gathered their belongings. "They'll try to negotiate, Make promises. I know, Stanley replied. That's why we're not waiting for their response. Within the hour, human ships began departing from Council facilities across the galaxy. Engineers dismantled the defense grids humanity had installed. Doctors closed the medical stations humans had funded. Teachers withdrew from the educational exchange programs that had raised generations of alien youth. The Crystalline Confederacy, which had relied on human military protection for 2 centuries, suddenly found their borders vulnerable to the same pirates they'd ignored when humans requested a joint task force to eliminate the threat. Permanently, the Vorentine Collective discovered that without human agricultural technology, their colony worlds couldn't sustain their populations. The famines humanity had warned about for 50 years began within months. The methane breathers learned that their expanded trade routes had been maintained by human patrol vessels, and without that presence the routes collapsed into chaos. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Half the members were facing economic collapse. Several regions were descending into open warfare. The carefully maintained balance that humans had supported for 3 centuries was unraveling. Maze sat in a cafe on Luna, Earth's moon, watching the news feeds from Council space. Stanley joined her, setting down 2 cups of coffee. Real Earth coffee, not the synthesized approximations the Council had always complained about. They've requested a meeting, he said.
Want to discuss terms for humanity's return? And?
I told them we'd consider their proposal in 317 years. Give them time to learn what we learned, Maze smiled faintly. That's cruel. No, Stanley said, sipping his coffee. That's fair. They spent centuries teaching us that being the galaxy's caretaker was a thankless job. Now they get to learn what it's like to manage without one. On Earth, humanity watched the Council's struggles with detached interest, focusing instead on their own worlds, their own problems, their own future. They had carried the galaxy long enough. Now the galaxy would have to carry itself.